Greetings, my name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition is a special as we sit down with a conversation with the very distinguished actor, writer, filmmaker, director, all-around entertainer. And he has actually been part of a production that's coming out called The Legend of Glynn Turman. Produced by Juney Smith. I'm joined by Juney Smith. He is the director of a powerful new documentary that just premiered here in Manhattan at the Riverside Church Theater, featuring the legend Glynn Turman. Welcome, Mr. Smith, to Cultural Caravan.
Well, thanks for having me.
Well, you know, we witnessed a powerful story about an actor who stands tall and really stands on the shoulders of many people. Tell us about what inspired you to do this drama.
Well, Glynn Turman is one of the world's finest actors. And the important thing about Glynn is that he started as a child in 1959 on Broadway. So he had the ability to experience some of the older actors, Ruby Dee, Claudia McNeil, the great Sydney Poitier. And he was able to take those treasures and bring it along throughout his whole career. But that foundation that he got sustained him and made him who he is today, and we thought it was terribly important that we document it so that when we're all long gone, and they want to know about some of the great thespians in America, Glynn Turman's name is there, top and center for me. So it's important that we did that.
Now, it's as we walk through his life, as he actually walked through the life, he stops and he really spends a good chunk on his foundation, his early years. How did you do it? Did you kind of let him structure it, or how did you both collaborate to make this happen?
Well, you know, I wrote a script. We had a script, and everything was scripted. And what I normally do is I don't tell the subjects the questions beforehand because it'll be contrived, and we don't want a performance. So I wrote a script, and he saw the script, but I wouldn't let him see the questions because I want the spontaneity in the answers. So what you saw, step by step by step, was written.
What is the message that you think this film will convey to the next generation of Black or African American actors?
It will give them a blueprint to follow of excellence, of choice, of dignity and honor, which Glynn bestows. So, and although there are obstacles in every career, you still can make the choices to always be upended on the excellent path. And that's what I think the younger generation will get from seeing this film, because everything that you saw today was excellent. The work was excellent. His, his approach to the work, and in between the work, was all excellent. He said that he acts for free, he gets paid to wait.
Absolutely.
That's waiting on the job and waiting to do the next job.
Now, certainly we thank you so much for really bringing this to the screen, and we are excited for you and the work, and we're excited about what this says, this message, this monument of work that'll be shared with us. But again, on behalf of Cultural Caravan, I want to sincerely thank you for giving us this opportunity to celebrate this dear elder while he's with us. Okay, all right.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Now I'd like to introduce legendary actor, director, um, filmmaker, Mr. Glynn Turman. Welcome to Cultural Caravan.
Well, thank you for having me, Louise.
It is a pleasure to have you on air. As I said, I've admired your work for decades. Okay, I grew up watching you on TV. We were talking about that. But let's, for the audience that may not be as familiar, tell us about what inspired you to go into theater.
New York, born boy, born and bred, right here in the city, in the cultural birthplace of the world, pretty much these days. And Broadway and off-Broadway and the jazz clubs and Harlem and the Apollo. And so culture is all around you when you grow up here in New York City. You can't miss it. In the middle of it, as a result of my mother moving to one of the hubs of Greenwich Village, where she met people like Miles Davis and Lorraine Hansberry and James Baldwin and Langston Hughes and you name them. And as a result of those relationships that I found myself in as a youngster, the pull to theater was almost inevitable because of her relationship with those people that I just mentioned. So that's how I found myself in the world of theater.
Now, the world was introduced to you at I believe, the age of 12, as in a phenomenal work that the great Lorraine Hansberry produced, A Raisin in the Sun. And for those who may not know, you were the first child that many of us said, Travis, who Travis was on, there. And that work really set the Black family center stage. Talk to us about that experience, which you discuss very fully in the new biographical work by Juney Smith entitled The Legend of Glynn Turman.
Well, like I said, that was my introduction to theater, the iconic play of Raisin in the Sun. And so I found myself surrounded by Sydney Poitier and Ruby Dee and Claudia McNeil, Diana Sands, Lou Gossett, all of these iconic people. And so that's quite a start for a youngster to get started in a business. You're kind of starting at the top, And so it meant quite a bit for me, and it was quite a springboard.
What was it like, that whole scene of interaction, the honing of the craft process for you?
Well, for me, the thing was that everybody was very serious about the work. And that was what it was about. It was about the work. You didn't find a lot of people wanting to become overnight successes or wanting to become famous or wanting to become, instant celebrities. You found people discussing, sitting in the park, sitting in Washington Square, sitting here in Central Park, walking down the streets, discussing the craft that they were involved in. So those kinds of conversations is what was the hub of the intellect of the business. Everybody was very serious about what it took to become a fine craftsman.
How would you say, in terms of looking at the state of the craft as relates to then, when you were coming up, and then today, how artists are groomed?
Well, we have a double-edged sword now. The fact that there is very little opportunity for national exposure at that time. Very few theaters that produced plays about people of color. Very few movies that were about people of color. Very few writers and directors on the scene that were able to get their works produced or directed in any of the medias. Now, because of the availability of streaming and the availability of the iPhone and instant and social media, you have people popping up claiming to be artists every minute of the day, and the validity of that can be argued until the cows come home. But what is apparent is the lack of understanding of craft. Craft is not so much a part of the conversation now as is exposure. And exposure does not necessarily mean you're putting your best foot forward. When you're talking craft, it's about putting your best foot forward. So there's a difference.
I recall, as I told you off camera, seeing your work in Winston-Salem, North Carolina, several years ago when you did it as a stage play,
Right.
Moving Man.
Right.
What encouraged you to now take it from the stage to on screen?
Well, the opportunity to, again, reach more people. Juney convinced me that I should, at this stage in my life, document it so that people can see it in perpetuity. Mm-hmm. He convinced me by mentioning that it would be a great thing to have for my children and my grandchildren and my great-grandchildren, of which I have many. Mm-hmm. And so with that in mind, I said, yeah, you're right, maybe I should. And we documented it. Mm-hmm. You saw the stage play, which I'm glad you did, but all of that even evolved from what I thought I would have been finished by now, is the autobiographical book, which I have not finished. And hopefully at some point I will get to finish the book, and all of this will be incorporated in that piece of work.
When people think about your films, your coming of age films, whether it be Cooley High, whether it be, as I said, Five on the Black Hand Side,
Right.
all of the films, your plays, everything speaks about us. Mm. And so I think when we look at you in the 70s, 80s, you're telling our story. Mm. And that's something that is special to all of us, because so used to seeing stereotypes and all sorts of other images that you take us back 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And that's what's a special thing. So I saw in the eyes, as I heard the responses, I'm hearing that collective confirmation, reaffirmation. Right. So that's why you telling the story and also putting it on the screen basically gives us a chance to reminisce as well. So we appreciate you taking us all with you through your journey.
Thank you. I appreciate that. So what it makes me feel like, I always feel like I'm still of the people, with the people. They still make me feel like, hey, preach, what's up? When I go to Chicago, it's, hey, preach. I'm walking down, it's not even Glynn, it's, hey, preach, and I'm still walking through. I was in that scene with you and Martha's in the candy store, so. And I get that to this day, Louise, is really when I go home, when I come here, the same thing, when I go uptown, and, it's just a love that the work seems to have endeared me to the people for, and I'm so thankful and appreciative of that,
When you think about Sydney Poitier, who you worked with as a child, tell us about some of your memories about working with him.
Well, it's just that he was such a gentleman, very serious about the work, and direct. I remember running into him right here, not far from where we are up here. And I was so excited to see him. I was a truck driver at the time. I hadn't seen him since I was a kid and Raisin in the Sun. I was 12 years old. And he'd made such an impact on me to the point that I decided to become an actor and went to study acting and at the High School of Performing Arts before it was LaGuardia. And I was a struggling actor here in New York, and I'm driving a truck, just trying to survive, and keep myself going. And I was going right down 7th Avenue and 50-something Street over here. And I saw him coming out of a restaurant, you know, and I pulled over with the truck and everything. I jumped out. I said, Sydney, it's me, Glynn. Glynn, remember me, Travis, Raisin? This Travis. And he stopped and he looked, well, young man, you know, look, you have grown up, you know. I said, yeah, man. I said, well, I see, what have you been doing with yourself? I said, well, that's my rig over there, you know, but I'm an actor, you know, I'm trying to become an actor, you know. You have any advice for me? He says, yes, I have. I said, what? Math. Study math. And he kept walking.
Wow. That's
I said, math? What the heck is he talking about? I want to talk about acting and the, you know, the motivations and the thises and the that. He said math, you know, the only subject, one of the subjects I never did pass in school, you know. And he kept going. And of course, it wasn't until I became a pro and in the business and got down the road and had to hire accountants and watch my money and, you know, get the percentages right with the agents and the government and manage all of this kind of things so that once you do become successful, you know what to do with your money. You got to know how to count.
What were some of the high points, would you say, of your career? Mm-hmm. And then tell us some of the challenges.
Well, the high point was just the other day at the Ethel Barrymore Theater. Couldn't have been a higher point in my career, 60 years, than to have the entire audience closing night performance of August Wilson's Piano Lesson, directed by the wonderful LaTanya Richardson Jackson, to have taken my seat there in the theater. And before I had a chance to sit down, the entire audience stood up and applauded me for just walking in. I didn't know who they were applauding for. I didn't know what that was all about. It took me a minute to realize that they were actually, you know, giving me my flowers, so to speak. And I'm still, as you can see, kind of moved by that. It was only a couple of days ago. So actually it was on my birthday, my 31st birthday. And the fact that it happened in the theater that I started my business in, the Ethel Barrymore Theater, 64 years prior to that. So it was like a complete circle, complete. You understand what I'm saying? Wow. Complete circle. So that was the high point. And so it makes me not even remember the low points.
If you had to speak to a young person who's sitting on the other side of the tube, who wants to understand what the fundamentals of being an actor, certainly math is one of them. But tell us about, from your experience, what you would suggest, some of the groundwork.
Well, it's not so much the ground, it's a state of mind. There's a state of mind you've got to put yourself in. And that's not just to become an actor, that's to become successful at anything. You first have to have a state of mind of success, you know. And part of those ingredients are very simple, actually. Very simple ingredients, you know, for that kind of success, you know. And I always say, you know, you don't try to do anything, you do it. You know, trying is a whole different entity. You know, it's a whole different set of skills, it's a whole different mindset if you try to do something, you know. But doing has its own set of skills and its own principles that you must follow. And it's a very selfish procedure, you know, because when you set out to do something, no one or anything should stop you, including yourself. You have to get out of your own way to do something. You know, if you try to do something, you can interfere with yourself. You can give yourself all kinds of excuses. You know, well, I'm trying, I did this, I'm trying to do this, I need a, you know, I'm, you know, and yeah, okay. But doing is doing. You know, so that goes for anything. you know, and then it becomes a degree of how well you do it and staying ready, because you never know when you're going to be called on to do it. So you can't get ready once you're called on. Once you're called on, you have to be ready. You see, so I stay ready to keep from having to get ready to do what I have to do.
How did you stay afloat during those challenging times, whether it be looking for a decent role, dealing with funds? What were some of the survival strategies that you recall?
I wanted to be an actor. So it was about acting. It wasn't about how much money I was going to make or how famous I was going to become. So to keep my head in the game and on course with what I had set for myself, I would act in off-Broadway plays, off-Broadway plays, 50-seat houses, you know. And when the great role came, I would take it if I was able, and if it came to me, and that would be a highlight. And then for the next 2 years, 3 years, I'm still now back off-Broadway or in some small 90-seat house in Los Angeles doing a play or so. But I kept acting, so that I always felt like I was in it. So any side hustle that I had to take on to eat wasn't strong enough to pull me off track. You see what I mean? Any side venture wasn't enough to make me, to put acting second, you know? So that, yeah, I'd have to go off and do this or go off and do that, and you know, sometimes I had to hope I didn't get caught. You know? But if the risk was too great, then I'd have to find something else because it couldn't jeopardize the track that I was on to be an actor. You see? So whatever it was that I had to do, if it took me away from acting and it jeopardized the fact that I was going to be an actor, that would be the mark of failure for me. Mm-hmm. You see? So the others, I don't care if I had to cash bottles, you know, that kind of stuff, you know, which I've had to do, you know.
And that's real. And that's real. And I think you saying the love of the craft, and you talk about in this wonderful movie, mm-hmm. all of the challenges, all of the opportunities, but also the sacrifice, mm-hmm. which comes as part of this. So when we talk about, you mentioned also about selecting roles. You're the part in your career that you can select and turn down. Have you had to turn down roles? And if so, what were the things about, without necessarily the role, that did not meet your, you know?
You know, I talk about some of those times in the documentary, which you have to buy to find out what that was about. Yeah. But to give you a yes or no answer, yes, of course, I've had to sometimes turn down roles, and that sometimes take roles that had to keep the lights on, you know, and had to keep the food on the table. I've been a father all my life of one child or another, you know, and so I have had to make sure that they eat, mm-hmm. you know. So in taking those kinds of jobs, they did what they were supposed to do, which was help sustain me and my family, you know. But hopefully they didn't, test my integrity too extremely. And so you do what you have to do, mm-hmm. you know, and you take the gifts that you're given. And I've been blessed to have been given many opportunities and gifts.
If you had to name the top 3 roles that you've had, what would they be?
It depends on the media that you're talking about, film,
doesn't matter.
Theater, or television.
Theater, television, movies.
Well, I don't know. you know, Cooley High is going to always be one of the premier roles, preach, that I've had. It sort of launched me nationwide into to the eyes of the public. But I've had some wonderful theater opportunities, you know, not counting, you know, the theater part that launched me in theater, in the business of Raisin in the Sun, but also, you know, some of the iconic roles that I've done with Ma Rainey's Black Bottom, you know, or Colonel Taylor in A Different World, or the Mayor in The Wire, you know. These have all been roles that have been noted, and of course I've won an Emmy for my role in Treatment on HBO, so that's an Emmy-winning role. And How to Get Away with Murder, I was nominated again for another Emmy. So, you know, I've just had some wonderful opportunities and some wonderful roles, and they've all come in different medias and at different times in my career.
If you had to select a role, if you had a choice of a type of role at this point in your career that you'd like to take, is there one?
Yeah, I'm working on that right now. It's a Western, and you know, that's another part of my life that I don't think a lot of people know about, that I've been a professional rodeo cowboy for 35 years. Been the Grand Marshal of the Bill Pickett Rodeo. That's a touring black rodeo event that tours the nation and has been touring it for 37 years now. And so that lifestyle has always been near and dear to me. And I'm looking for that iconic Western role to play before I hang up my spurs.
Well, I just want to say, sir, that it is an honor. I consider you a national treasure, an international treasure, because you basically have been telling our story, our collective story, for 60 so odd years, since you were a little boy till this very day. And I think that we basically want to definitely, and through the audience, say thank you for telling our story, for making those stands, to doing what you need to do to represent us with such dignity and integrity. So on behalf of Cultural Caravan, I want to sincerely thank you for spending some time with us, and we look forward to seeing you in many more presentations.
Louise, thank you so much.
Thank you, sir.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you.